welcome to another week of Evolution Live. I do enjoy that theme music. I just kind of sit here for those 90 seconds just jigging along. Hello and welcome to the fifth lesson in this Evolution Live series. Welcome back to those of you that have watched all four so far, and this is the fifth one. And a new welcome to those that have just joined. For those that have just joined, it is literally just me sat at my desk trying to control everything. I have a whiteboard, I have notes, I have all the setup, I have the audio, I have the comments. So bear with. But as always, all of these videos are live streamed, but then are up indefinitely on my YouTube channel afterwards. So if you do want to go back and watch any of those, you can. This week is quite exciting. We are doing sexual selection. And so sexual selection is, I suppose, it's what I really got into. It's what I started my PhD thinking my PhD was going to be all about. And then it turned less in sexual selection and more kin selection, which was last week's topic. This series is aimed at people with no real background in biology. So if you've started from the very first lesson, you'll see it progresses on and on. As we're now on the fifth one, which I should bear in mind is, the intro music has gone. I'm going to fade up background music. There we go. There we go. Now that's all levels. I can take these off. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so now this is the fifth class of Evolution Live, and so I went to Oxford. I have my undergraduate and my PhD in evolutionary biology from Oxford. The terms there are only 8 weeks long, which means that we are halfway through the term. Congratulations everybody who is here. And so, yes, we're halfway through. So if you're new and you think, oh, there's some stuff here that doesn't quite make sense, stick on watching because it's live and you know everyone wants a bit of social interaction right now, but you can always go back and watch the previous ones. So what are we doing today? We are covering sexual selection. So quick recap of last week's videos. I have been watching Outlander, binge watching that. I think I've been watching it about a month and I'm already at the end of season 4. So they always do a little recap at the beginning. So previously, on the previous episode of Evolution Live, we were talking about kin selection and how, so initially we thought about natural selection being all about surviving and reproducing, and from the individual context, kin selection was really looking at it from the gene point of view. We call it gene-centered evolution. And so natural selection is about making more copies of your genes, whether that is reproducing yourself and having lots of your own offspring, or whether that is helping a relative to have offspring. So that's what we covered in the last one. This time we're going to look into that reproduction side a bit more with sexual selection. This is going to be a PG rated video, I would say. Totally fine. For secondary school kids, that's kind of what I'm aiming it at. I'm assuming that lots of people in secondary school can't go to school at the moment, so want to learn this. But we are going to be talking about sex. So, yeah, of course we're talking about sex. It's sexual selection. So the first topic is sexual selection is about reproduction. You're going to be like, no way, Sally, well done. Yeah, I mean, it's got sex in the title. Sexual selection is about reproduction. And I kind of framed this whole thing about why do peacocks have big tails? And that is partly because, we're going to the notebook straight away. So why do male peacocks have big tails? I mean, male peacock is a bit of a tautology. If it wasn't a male peacock, it would be either a peahen or a peafowl. I did an entire talk for Ada Lovelace Day as there's no such thing as a female peacock, which you can watch. It's on my channel in the other videos I've worked on, if you scroll down to the bottom of my channel page. But peacocks, which are the male of the species peafowl, as you know, have these extraordinary tails. They really are something to behold, and it's not even just the visuals. When the males display, there are some in the park I walk to, and they'll go whoosh, and they'll bring their tail up, and then they'll rattle it. They'll proper do jazz hands, and you can kind of hear this crackling, this rattling noise. They're just great. And I think nowadays we kind of take peacocks for granted. Like, we know what peacocks are, what they're like, but when you think about it, they're spectacular animals. Like, the colours are insane. Interestingly, no bird has a blue pigment. All of that blue is created by structural coloration, which means that it's all about refraction. If you were to chop it open, you wouldn't find anything blue inside those feathers. But in terms of natural selection, Darwin found this a bit odd. So obviously in 1856, I'm going to say, a little bit rusty on the dates of publication, I think it was 1856 when Darwin wrote on the origin of species by natural selection. And in it he wrote, well, my entire theory is that the adaptations we see are so that animals can survive, and, you know, he didn't coin it, but it's survival of the fittest. And he said this peacock's tail, it doesn't help it to eat, it doesn't help it to fly, in fact it just gets in the way. What's going on? And I mean, he wasn't completely baffled by it. He did say, oh, I wonder if this is to do with the fact that it helps them attract mates. And Darwin actually wrote a sequel to The Origin of Species called The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex, I think is the title. And I have a feeling that was written in 1872, but I might just have a quick sneaky Google. And I got the title right, at least, and it was published in 1871. Oh, I was only 1 year out. That's not too bad. But yeah, it's less known than The Origin of Species, but it covers a lot of what we're going to be covering today, which is that evolution is not just about surviving, it's also about reproducing. And so, what are we talking about? Let's go back to... So selection is about reproduction, and you'll note that whenever I've been talking about it in the last few videos, I've been very careful to say it's about surviving and reproducing, because as we know from last week, sometimes it's not your own reproduction that matters, it's your relative's reproduction. And from an evolutionary perspective, now we know that what we're trying to do is make more copies of your genes. Frankly, it doesn't matter how long you live, as long as you can produce offspring. So for example, take humans, because we understand the human lifespan. Once you reach about 70, either sex, you're not really going to have any more kids. And so having an adaptation that helps you live from, I don't know, age 90 to age 100, sure, you're living longer, but that's not really making more copies of your genes. Whereas even if you had an adaptation that meant that you died age 30, but you were able to produce 10 kids in that time, it's, in evolutionary terms, it's arguably more important to produce lots of kids regardless of how short your lifespan is, than to have a really long lifespan but not produce any kids at all. And so that's why it's all about surviving and reproducing. And this week is all about reproducing. So there's been lots of talk about, I've been talking about evolution, natural selection, sexual selection, kin selection. We had drift in the first episode. So I just want to briefly draw you a little diagram so you can get a kind of a feel for where these all join in. So we're going to call this evolution. And this is my Venn diagram, and I'm probably going to regret drawing this first, but hey. Within evolution. I suppose we have... Now ignore the fact that I've got bits in my Venn diagram that aren't... You know what I mean. So we've got... let's call this... genetic drift. Remember, that's the random part of evolution. We've got... And some people were asking about this in previous streams. Artificial selection. So evolution, remember, is just the change in gene frequency over time. So both the random side, genetic drift, and the artificial side, they both cause changes in gene frequency over time. But of course, then you've also got the big one, which is natural selection. And like I say, ignore the fact that on this Venn diagram, I've got bits that don't fit into any of these categories. Then within natural selection, we have got social selection, I'm going to call it. I'm hesitating because I'm thinking that's a term I've not actually discussed before. But that social just means anything where individuals are interacting. So it's not just you and your physical environment. So it's not just like trying to find food, but you and other members of your species are interacting, and what you do has an effect on the fitness of other individuals. That's what we mean by social in biology. So if I give food to my sister, that reduces my fitness and increases her immediate fitness. That is a social interaction. Fighting between two individuals is a social interaction. And so then within social selection, we also get sexual selection. So sexual selection is a type of evolution, so genes are changing over time, that's subject to natural selection. So it's all about trying to increase the number of genes in the next generation. It's social selection because we've got more than one individual of the same species interacting. And in this case, that interaction is to do with sex and reproduction and mating opportunities. If you're wondering, kin selection is also in social selection. They're kind of synonymous. They overlap. I mean, kin selection can kind of cover all of it, but if we're talking about kin selection as purely the things that have a... I haven't got that far into it. It's really hard, you know, as I'm planning out these lessons, the closer we get to my personal subject matter, the more I want to go into like a full amount of detail. People are saying that it looks like the shocked emoji. It kind of does. As a kind of, it is the face of evolution going like, there we go, little shocked emoji. And so natural selection is about reproduction, and this is all about the reproduction side. So, next point. Males compete more for sex. This could easily be this 1 point, 2 or 3 hours worth of lectures. I'm gonna have to whiz over this bit just so that I can kind of cover all of the topics. This is gonna be an introduction to sexual selection. So I'm trying to cover as much as possible, but because I've only got an hour, we're going to be going very fast over this. So let's start by defining male and female. And remember, I am a biologist. I am talking about sex, which is biological. Nothing in this is going to be about gender. Don't you even think about talking about gender in the comments section. It's not relevant to this conversation at all. So, short disclaimer out of the way. We have males and we have females. Not all species have these two different groups. For example, plants, you get ones that can self-fertilize, you get ones that have both parts. In fungi, you have multiple groups. But in species that have males and females, we define these two groups as the group that makes sperm and the group that makes eggs. It's my little nucleus. And these are the sex cells, oddly enough, because they are the cells involved in making eggs. So quite literally, sex cells. A little marketing joke there. And the collective name for all of the sex cells is gametes. And so we define males as the sex with, so males, that is the symbol for male, by the way, and that is the symbol for female. Because I studied sexual selection and relatedness and stuff like this in flies, we would simplify it a lot. So this is the symbol for Venus, and this, I think, is the Mercury symbol. So males we define as having the smaller gametes, and there's a whole really interesting theory about this. It's called anisogamy, so about an without, iso meaning same, gametes. What's his name? Chubby Emu is like from the Latin. No, it's from the Greek. Iso meaning same, an meaning without. So it means gametes of different sizes, and there's a whole thing about this. And actually, it's because that there are gametes of different sizes that we have these two sexes. And so these have the bigger gametes. It does mean that you can't say, well, why do females have bigger sex cells than males? So why are eggs bigger than sperm? You can't say why do females have the bigger ones, because we define females as the group of individuals that produce the bigger ones. Cool. Mars, thank you, not Mercury. I was going to say, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. They're the astrological signs. Okay, so because of this, if you think males, all they're producing is something that's like that big, tiny. Whereas to scale, an egg might even be bigger. And you've probably all seen various images of fertilization where you get loads of sperm surrounding an egg. And if you think about it, like, you know this already, sperm are small, sperm are plentiful. A single male can produce millions of sperm, and each of those sperm has the capability of producing an entire offspring. It probably won't, but it has the capability of doing it. Eggs are quite big. They take a lot of food to produce. If you think, they're mostly made of protein, so you've got to eat all that protein to produce them. And so females produce fewer eggs because they're more costly to make. Like, when I'm talking about costly, I'm talking about resources. So I'm talking about food, time, energy. But you can imagine it like literally as cost. Like, imagine that males and females are each given 100 quid. And you can either buy sperm for 5 pence each and therefore get 2,000 sperm for your 100 quid. Or you can buy eggs, which cost 2 quid, so you can only buy 50 of them. And those are actually different, even more extreme. And so, at the most fundamental level, what males put into reproduction, just the sperm, is less costly than what females put into reproduction, which is more costly. And then you got to think of all the extra things that come with reproduction. So it's not usually just a sperm and an egg meet. In mammals, you've got the whole placenta and childbirth thing. Ugh, childbirth to me is horrendous. The thought of a parasite growing inside you and changing your mood and physiology and then erupting out of you is horrendous. Sorry to any new mothers. And so you've got pregnancy. If you're a bird, you've got all these eggs. A lot of animals have parental care. So feeding the chicks when they're still helpless, or lactating, producing breast milk. Like, kids are a lot of work. And those of you that are in lockdown with kids will know that kids are a lot of work. And females, on the whole, put more effort into reproduction than males. And because of this, and I'm going over this so quickly, and it's such an interesting topic, but there's a whole thing called Bateman gradients, and isogamy, and the one-to-one principle. But to summarize it, this means that because males, like I said, had the capability of producing thousands and thousands of sperm, males, if you imagine their reproductive success on a graph, so reproductive success is a term I'll use a lot, and it just means how good are you at reproducing. So imagine this as how many kids did you have, but not also how many kids did you have, but how healthy were those kids? Because if all of those kids die like straight after they're born, that's not great. So males can vary from having 0 to lots. Very scientific axis here. So some males, a lot of males might produce an intermediate number of offspring. Some males are completely unsuccessful and fail to produce a single offspring. Maybe they can't find a female. Maybe they get outcompeted. Maybe they are just stuck on an island all on their own, and there's no one around. Some males produce loads of offspring. Famously, Genghis Khan is thought to be the human with who sired the most number of children. And we're talking in the thousands that he fathered, to the point where if you look at the Y chromosome, so the male-specific chromosome, you can see that in the region where the Mongols were, how genetically similar their Y chromosomes are, because so many of them can trace themselves back to this one man. It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, females, I'll put them on this graph as well, but as a squiggle. Sure, there'll be a few that don't produce any offspring. Maybe they can't find a male. But most of them will be at around this sort of point. There won't be any that can make lots. The human female with the most number of offspring was a farmer's wife in Russia about 150, 200 years ago, who managed to produce 69 kids through a mixture of births. I think she had about 15 births, so a lot of triplets, twins, quadruplets. And just think, like, a female having 69 kids. Gives you nightmares. But then compare that to Genghis Khan having thousands of kids. It shows you quite how different the capability of having offspring is between males and females. And so we see, so let's put in a few more individuals. So we see that males, let me get a highlighter, have a huge spread of what their reproductive success can be. Whereas females, vast majority of them will be able to have kids. Because let's be honest, in nature, sperm is very rarely a limiting resource. There's a lot of it to go round. And so they're limited by their own reproduction, not by somebody else's, whereas males have loads of sperm. So they're not limited by their own reproductive capability. They are limited by their ability to find eggs, in essence. Someone's saying that I don't read the chat that much. I do keep an eye on it now and then, but there is an awful lot to be going on with. And yes, 69 Kids, yeah, I gave a talk at the Royal Institution called Secrets of Sex, both on their channel and my channel, which goes into this a little bit more. But that's how I know all these stats randomly about like Genghis Khan and this poor old peasant woman. Also, we don't know her name. How sad is that? So, because of this, I'm just going to write it out for clarity. Males have greater variation in success. Which is really important, and because of this, males compete more for success. Because if you think, if you are going to have Starch, we do know the name of her husband, or at least we know of her as his wife. Ridiculous. If you can think, if you've got two outcomes, whether you've got 4 kids or 5 kids, those are your only 2 options. It doesn't really matter to you that much, so you're not going to fight a huge amount over which option you pick. If your options are having no kids and having 1 million kids, okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, 1,000 kids, you're really going to want to fight for that 1,000 kids lottery ticket rather than the 0 kids. So there is so much more competition in males. That is that point. Oh, thank you, Ali, for the little super chat there. Okay, so males compete more for sex. Male competition. If you do start reading about this yourself, you will hear about interspecific and intra-specific competition. I hate these words. Inter means across or between, and intra means within. So you can think of like international, or someone pointed out in another thing, intravenous. So international is between nations, so there are lots of different nations involved. Intra is within. So male competition is also called intrasexual competition. So within the same sex. Now you see why I call it male competition. There's enough terminology in biology, let's be honest. So all of these males are competing for reproductive opportunities. They want to have sex and they've got to fight in order to get it, because some of them get lots and some of them don't get much at all. And so in response, you get armaments just from males fighting with other males. Okay, so this is the point where we go to pictures. Okay, so you've probably all seen animals like this. These are red deer, they're stags, and they've got these huge antlers in the mating season. Antlers are not made of bone, they're made of hair. How weird is that? That's the difference between a horn and an antler. A horn is made of bone, like a rhino horn, whereas an antler is made of hair. Have I got that the wrong way round? Maybe. Deer shed their antlers between seasons, a lot of them. But only the males grow the massive ones. And it's because they use them to fight with other males. Why are they fighting with other males, Sally? Well, guess what? It's to have sex. Because in red deer, they have harems. They have a territory which they defend. All the females group together and just chill. They just eat grass and leaves and, get ready to produce offspring. And then the males fight over who takes control of that group of females. And so these are armaments. They are literally weapons to have sex with, not to have sex with, to fight other males with. They're sexual weapons. And we see these all over the place. And just so I'm not entirely mammal-centric, these are stag beetles. You can probably see why they're called stag beetles when I put them next to stag deer. I looked really hard before this class. I have 2 dead stag beetles in a pot somewhere that used to be under my bed, but I've moved house and not unpacked all of my boxes yet. So somewhere in this house are 2 dead stag beetles that I was going to show you on camera because they're really cool. They're big. They're the biggest British land insect. Land beetle, sorry. There are probably butterflies that are wider, but they're big animals, and they have these big droning noises when they're flying because they're so heavy. But the males have these antlers, and then they fight with each other, and one will try and push the other one off the branch. Super cool. And they're doing this to fight with each other, to have sex with females. And we often think about male-male competition in this fighting to be able to have sex with a female. So it's before copulation, so we call it pre-copulatory competition. However, just because you've had sex with a female doesn't mean she's gonna have your kids, particularly if she's having sex with more than one male. And so we also get post-copulatory competition. And that's where your sperm are fighting amongst each other as to which one goes on to fertilise the egg. And do I have an example for this? No, not yet. And so yeah, sperm competition, super cool. Like I say, I'm having to go straight through all of these really interesting topics, and then maybe later on in this lecture series, I can go into it in a little bit more detail. But just to introduce you to the topics, so males that fight with each other, you produce armaments. So you produce weapons, and those weapons can help you either to have access to females, or these weapons can be in the sperm, in the ejaculate, to help your sperm beat off other males' sperm and go on to fertilise the egg. Okay, next point. Female choice. Now, you've got to remember that Darwin was a Victorian, and a lot of these ideas were coming around in the Victorian times. And so, because science is done by scientists, and scientists are people, science does tend to, I suppose, be influenced by the thoughts and the culture of the people doing it. That's not to say that truth, because obviously in science we are searching for the absolute truth. There is only one truth, and we take a very long way to get there, but each time we're getting closer and closer and closer. But to begin with, we're often shaped by our own culture. That's always going to be the case. That's fine. That's why we improve on things, and why we correct each other when we're wrong. And why, like, the scientific method works. You're like, oh, maybe that idea isn't right after all. In those days, obviously males were the dominant sex in humans. Males were the ones that did everything, and females were oppressed. And so the thought that females had any role in sex was kind of just ignored. That like, females are passive. Sex is something that's done to them, done unto them. They're just a vessel for reproduction. And so instead, sorry, just reading comments and checking audio at the same time. And so it actually took them a bit of a while to realise, hang on a sec, chaps. Peacocks' tails don't exactly help. A peacock male doesn't fight with another male based on the size of its tail. Like, this tail is not a weapon. Yeah. And so they're like, oh, wait. females aren't just passive objects, are they? They're individuals in their own right and, you know, have agency in reproduction. And so there's this other huge side to sexual selection, which isn't males and males fighting with each other, but males trying to win over females and females being choosy about which males they pick. So female choice is huge, and let's be honest, it creates the best bits of biology. If there's something pretty on an animal, chances are it's because a female chose it. So we have, also gives me a chance to show you my favourite species of duck. Yes, I do have a favourite duck. It is this. This is the mandarin duck. We get them in the UK once they've been imported from Asia. How adorable is that duck? Obviously we've got a male and a female here, and you intuitively know that it's the male on the left and it's the female on the right. Let's be honest, this is the case in the vast majority of species. Let's write that in a different colour. Mandarin duck, which I love. Because males are the showy of the sexes. Obviously there are exceptions. I don't have time to go into the exceptions. The exceptions happen in some really interesting cases. You get both sex role reversal and you get male choice on females, where the females have to compete for the attraction of the male. That in itself was like only came in the 1970s when they're like, what? What do you mean females want to have more than one partner? Females want to choose to have sex? Like, females only need to have one male and then they've got all of their eggs fertilized. Why on earth would she want to sleep around? Adam Stephen in the comments says he's peacocking. Why no, he's mandarin ducking. So how adorable are these little ducks? But yeah, that is a beautiful looking male, and there is no reason for him to be beautiful. It does not help him to fight with other males. It does not help him to get food. To be honest, it costs him a lot of food to make those colours. Those pigments, those patterns, they take a lot to produce. It's much cheaper in terms of resources to be like the female, to be brown, because you're less likely to get eaten by predators. It's because females like sexy males. We've got, obviously, our good old friend the peacock. But what I thought was interesting to point out as well, because we were talking about pre-copulatory and post-copulatory male-male competition. I told you there's a lot of terms in biology, I'm sorry. This is going to take a little bit of explaining, but this here is an egg. And this here, each one of these are sperm. And so you can see that compared to your normal image of how small sperm are compared to the egg, here you can only get like 6 sperm for every egg. And what it is it's one very long tail that's instead just been wrapped around all the time. And that's how you get these little bundles. If you were to unravel that sperm, I don't know if you can see by the scale bar here, but if you were to unravel it, it would be about 6 centimetres long. And it is, in absolute terms, the longest sperm in the animal kingdom. 6 centimetres. And you want to know what animal this comes from? This comes from a species of fruit fly, Drosophila bifurca, which is about 6 millimetres long. So you've got a little fly that's about this sort of size, and its sperm, if you were to stretch it out, would literally be 10 times longer than it. And guess what? It's because female choice also happens post-copulatory, after sex. And the females choose the longest sperm. To that female, long sperm is super sexy. And so over time, the males with the longest sperm, like we know, go on to have more kids. And then on and on and on, you get super long sperm. How cool is that? And also the fact that it's not like relative. So this tiny fruit fly has longer sperm than the blue whale, irrespective of body size. None of that in relation to body size, like a get out clause. Absolute terms, it's bigger than a blue whale. How cool is that? Okay, 20 minutes left. What are females choosing? Now we know that females are choosing sexy males. And I've described them as sexy males because that's literally accurate. They are sexy because they have the traits that are chosen by females. And so what is it that a female is looking for? Well, once again, there are two things that the female is looking for. One of them is this. So, what do women want from sex? Which is one of the video titles from that Royal Institution talk. I'm scrolled out, aren't I? 100%. Oh, that's a bit big. It'll go like this. So what women want from sex. So they want two things. The vaguely named direct benefits. And guess what? Indirect benefits. So direct benefits is there is an immediate benefit to the female from choosing that male to have sex with. To put it in human terms, even though I am grossly anthropomorphizing, because humans and reproduction is a whole different kettle of fish because we're such a social species. It's if I go out with the millionaire, then I'm likely to get dinner at a fancier restaurant than if I went out with the unemployed guy. Literally, I will be better fed if I pick that male than that male. And it sounds a bit stupid, but here is a photo I took in 2011 when I was in Madagascar. That was a fun time. Do you remember that time when we could, get on a plane and travel to other countries and do cool stuff like that? So this is a type of cricket in the jungles of Madagascar. And at the time, I wasn't really quite sure what was going on. I thought maybe it was some kind of weird, what is this? It's not, it was like a gelatinous goo. And, I wasn't sure if it was a parasite, if it was coming out of it or what. But that is what's called a spermatophore. Obviously, it's got sperm in it. It's to do with reproduction. That is a ball of delicious jelly that the male gives to the female when they have sex. And the female eats it. And so, depending on the male, she gets a great meal from sex. The male does it, if you're wondering, because the better fed she is, then the more eggs she'll produce. Because in insects and a lot of animals, the amount of food that the female has, the size of the female is directly proportional to the fecundity, the amount of offspring she can have. So he feeds her, so she's able to produce more eggs. She picks him because he gives her the best meal compared to all of the other males. So that is a direct benefit of sex. You might also think maybe by having sex, another direct benefit of sex is sexual cannibalism, where the males, so you often hear this in spiders, males will let the female eat them, literally consume them, whilst having sex, partly because when she's eating him, she's distracted, and so more of her sperm is able to get into her and fertilise the eggs. And, you know, like, they rip off their heads, but you don't need a head to have sex. You just need testes to have to work and get sperm into the female. Yeah, once you start studying sexual selection, your attitude towards sex and normal things goes completely out the window. But yeah, that's a direct benefit for the female. She gets a nice tasty meal. But most of the time, we're talking about indirect benefits. Oops. Do I want that? No, but I will bring them down. Ignore this. So, indirect benefits are things that give her better offspring. So benefits to do with having higher quality offspring. So you're looking for a genetically good male. You're looking for a male that will sire children that are fit and strong and going to win the next generation. You're not looking for males that, you know, they're a bit weak, they're a bit sickly, and if you've got kids with them, then they'll all just be a bit small and malnourished and die and not be very good. You want to have good children. You want to have good offspring. And so we call these indirect benefits because they're not directly benefiting the female in terms of how long she lives or even necessarily how many offspring she has. But they do benefit her because obviously her job as a vehicle, as we learned last week, is to have more kids, and for those kids to have more kids. There's no point, if all of your children don't die before they have any offspring, that's pretty useless. You need them to produce grandchildren and so on and so on and so on for your genes to go down the line. So it's all about having higher quality offspring. And so when females are choosing for indirect benefits, they're trying to find a good male. So they are finding a good male. This is all very Mrs. Bennet, trying to find an eligible young bachelor. But that's what it is, finding a good male. But the big question is, 10 minutes left. How to find a good male. They don't have Tinder or Bumble or what are the other apps? Hive, is that even one? No, that's a shopping app, isn't it? I don't know. How do you find a good male? And the problem is that you assume that all males lie. Well, no, before you assume that, so there are two parts to this. Well, there are many parts, but everything is bisected, split into two. So, what is it they're looking for? Okay, this is quite a circular argument, so I'm going to describe it to you first before writing anything down. It's called, and I kid you not, this is literally the technical term for it, the sexy sun hypothesis. because what makes a male attractive is that he produces attractive sons. And so let's imagine that, so there's a fish called the stickleback, and they have orange bellies. And for some reason, we're going to ignore this for some reason, females find orange bellies super attractive. They love a ginger stickleback. And so if you can mate as a female with the most orange stickleback, your kids, your sons, will be really orange as well. And because we know that all the females really dig an orange fish, then your sons will be attractive. And you may say, Sally, this sounds super circular, that the males are attractive because they're attractive? And you're right, this is entirely a circular argument, and it relies on the fact that there is an initial reason for something to be attractive. So maybe the fish, something to do with their eyes means that they can see orange more clearly than they can see any of the other colours, so it stands out more. There's this initial bias. And so, because like if you're thinking, think you're Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, and you've got, how many has she got? 4 daughters? 5 daughters? An unfortunate number of daughters, let's be honest, in Regency England. And you want to be successful, then you will want to marry, or to have your daughters to marry, the most attractive young man, because then you know that your kids will be their kids will be attractive, and we know that attractive kids are successful at finding mates because they're attractive. And that's why we call it the sexy son hypothesis. Males are sexy because they produce sexy sons. But it does mean that you get this runaway selection, which is the other name for it. Because if you haven't already noticed, this is a positive feedback loop. And so you have a male that, I don't know, let's choose another example. A male that has, let's choose the same one. So a bright orange belly. Also, what's super cool about sticklebacks is that females can choose which sperm to use to be fertilized by. And even if they haven't seen the male, they end up choosing the sperm of the more orange male. So something about the sperm tells her how orange he is without ever seeing him. How cool is that? So the male has a bright orange belly. That makes him attractive. And so he produces orange-bellied sons that are attractive. And so you can see how it completely just runs away with itself. It starts off small and then suddenly it gets massive. That's the sexy son hypothesis. There's also the Zahavi's handicap principle. And this is based on the assumption that all men lie. You cannot trust a male. Obviously, if you're a male, you want to have access to females. You want to be able to reproduce. And so if you're a poor quality male, if you've got quite sickly genes, you're not going to go around advertising that, are you? You're not going to put on your Tinder bio, hi, I'm quite a lot smaller than everybody else, and if you have kids with me, they'll probably die in childhood. No, you're going to want to big yourself up. Say, hi, I have a great sense of humour. I love dogs. I like to go hiking. And you're going to say that you're amazing. So how on earth, under those circumstances, can a female work out who's telling the truth or not? If a male has some signal, some trait, some adaptation, some body part that's saying, oh, look at me, I'm so good, I'm so sexy, she'd be like, yeah, but are you really though? Or are you just trying to lie to me? And so what she needs is an honest signal. And thank you so much, M, for the 50 units of money. Is that check? CZK? I don't know, but thank you. An honest signal. All she needs is a nice, honest man. And so an honest signal is something that you cannot cheat. So it cannot be cheated. And the way that you find something that cannot be cheated is to look for something where it's literally impossible for weak males to have this trait. So, for example, those deer we were talking about before, they bellow during the mating season. They go, ooh, and they have these huge throats. And as we know, basic physics, the bigger an object is, the deeper the sound is. And so females are attracted to deer with louder, lower pitched calls because it's physically impossible for a smaller male to produce a lower sound because of physics. And so I realise I might overrun a few minutes, but I get very excited about sexual selection, let's be honest. I want to introduce you to... Actually, this is more of an example of Sexy Sun than anything else, but hey, it's a cool example. It's a classic example. So this is called what type of widow bird is it? It's one of the widow birds. Let's see. Long-tailed widow bird. Well, that's an obvious name, isn't it? This is the male of the species, and guess what? It's got a very long tail, and it's, as you can imagine, if you're trying to fly and someone's weighed you down with a huge amount of feathers, amount of weight, it's going to be a lot harder to live. If your job is flying around and trying to get food, trying to avoid predators, just everything, then, sorry, I just laugh because someone says, this is the last class of the day, we can stay a bit longer. I remember that from school. So they've got this huge tail, which is a handicap to their survival. Remember Darwin was talking about, isn't it odd, that there are these birds with these huge tails that definitely don't help them survive. If anything, they hinder them from surviving. Well, that's the case with the widow bird. And then what this guy called Anderson did in 1982 in a classic experiment is he was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to catch a load of birds, chop their tails off and glue their tails back on again. Would it pass modern ethics? I'm not sure. So, yeah. So he literally caught a load of these birds, and some of them he didn't do anything to. They're control number one. Some of them he chopped off their tail and then glued their tail back on again. So the tail is the same length as it always was, but they've had the chopping and the gluing. So that's control number two, just to make sure that the act of chopping and gluing didn't make a difference. And then he took some of the birds and he chopped off their tails. Remember, their tails is just the feathery bit, so it's not like he's actually cutting flesh. And he then shortened that tail and glued back on a shorter tail onto that male. A shorter tail on that male. And then others he took them and glued on an extra long tail. And so they've had it artificially lengthened. So, what did he find? He then looked at how many number of nests did this male have, which is basically reproductive successes. How sexy was that male? And guess what? So these are our two control groups. So this is the baseline for success. These are the ones that he cut their tail off and he made them shorter. Oh, first thing to note is that actually there's very little difference between these two. So apparently having your tail cut off and then glued back on again straight afterwards doesn't really affect how sexy you are, oddly. These ones had their tails chopped off. And you can see that they became less good at producing nests. They were less sexy. Whereas these ones, which had their tails increase in size, suddenly became a lot sexier. And this tells, so when we're looking at why do males have long tails in this species, this tells you that having a longer tail makes you better at reproducing. And so females are choosing the males with the longer tails. So it's a great example of female choice. And obviously the same is true in peacocks. The more elaborate the tail, the more successful that male is. And so you do get these extreme traits. If it was impossible for a weaker male to produce a longer tail, this would be a great example of Zahavi's handicap principle. One kind of extension to the handicap principle. Like literally imagine you've got a bodybuilder and I'm going to be really unfair. I'm going to say a computer nerd because maybe they're strong and muscly. I'm sure they're lovely people and have a much more rounded personality, but let's be honest, they're not known for their physical prowess. And you make them go about their day whilst wearing, 50 kilos of lead on their back, you're going to see which one is stronger. And there is no way for the computer nerd to cheat in that scenario. Like, it's impossible for him to go faster. It's literally out of his control. So very briefly, I just want to add on that there's also Hamilton Zook. Hamilton we've all heard of before. He was the inclusive fitness guy. Zook is, I think she's Mariana Zook. Certainly because of an M. The two of them realise that one of the big things is disease. So it's not necessarily how muscly and how strong you are, but how good are you at fighting disease. And that's obviously, how good are you at fighting disease? I can't speak and write two different things at once. And obviously that's hugely important in terms of how good your genes are. If you're gonna die of some childhood illness, that's useless, and a female will want to know that. And so one of the problems with female choice is that once everyone, like go back to the sticklebacks, once everyone is 100% orange, there's no variation there. And so the good thing about handicaps is that they force there to be some level of variation because it's physically impossible for everyone to max out that characteristic. And if you've got like a beautiful, if you're that mandarin duck or a peacock and you've got this beautiful display, chances are, if you are suffering from lots of diseases, that visual display is going to show signs of disease. Maybe it's not as vibrant, maybe there are holes missing, maybe it looks a bit moth-eaten, or the colours are wrong, or there are spots in it, or something like that. You can see when the individual has been suffering from disease. And so that is a trait that cannot be cheated. It's impossible for a sickly, diseased individual to produce a perfect plumage. So it's a handicap. It's based on disease, so it's kind of an extension. It's the Hamilton sort of hypothesis. And females choose that. And so why do peacocks have big tails? They have big tails because male peacocks have a greater variation in reproductive success than female peacocks, which means that males have to fight over sex more than females do, which is why it's in the males and not in the females. And rather than literally fighting each other for access to the female is choosing which male she wants to mate with. And so all of this is down to female choice. And the female wants to have her offspring be genetically healthy. So she's got to find a trait that is genetically healthy. She's got to find a trait that shows her how genetically good the male is. She needs to find a good male. And that male is sexy in part because a male with a big tail will produce sexy sons, sexy son hypothesis, but also because that tail is a handicap. It's harder to go about your everyday life and to fight off disease whilst maintaining this beautiful, elaborate tail. And so that's one of the reasons that females choose them, and then you get this feedback loop, and that is why male peacocks have beautiful tails. That ran over a little bit. But that is the end of the this lesson. Next week is going to be on how to make a new species. It's all about speciation. It's called On the Origin of Species, Darwin's book. So we're going to talk about how the origin story of species. And as always, you can watch any of these lectures back in your own time. I want to say thank you to, oops, that is not the right size. Thank you to everyone who has been helping me on Patreon. As you know, being a freelancer at the moment is tough, and so this is my main source of income, which is really scary. But yes, so thank you to everyone. Obviously these videos are free, but if you are in a situation where you have some extra money, thank you so much. And all that remains to be said, I have put my headphone in so that I can gently fade up the music, is thank you very much. Stay safe. Go outside in the sun where possible, where it's safe. Keep your hands clean, and see you next week.